Good afternoon. This is the House Judiciary Committee. This is a continuation of the voting session that we're having on House Bill 837 and then House Bill 1. When we left things last night at about 9:15, we were talking about amendments to House Bill 837. There is an amendment that is being offered by Delegate Cham, who is not in a moving vehicle, but is in a car, but not in a car that is being operated at the moment. And Delegate Cham, you yesterday asked a question about specifically adding into the public health study a group of individuals under the age of 18. Right now, the study does individuals under 21. We would keep the individuals under 21, so we'd get a flavor of between 18 and 21, but you wanted to include people under 18. Is that correct?
Just confirming, is this for HB 1 or 837?
837. This is in the public health study.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So the committee is considering this a friendly amendment. Could I have a motion on Delegate Cham's amendment? Again, that would add that the study that is done.
Favorable.
Second.
Motion is second. Again, the study that's done would include a look at people using cannabis under the age of 18 years. Is there further discussion? Seeing Delegate Williams is waving her hand. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I couldn't find the actual hand thing fast enough. So just quick question. So are we removing the 21 years of age and replacing it with 18? We're adding.
We're adding 18. So you'd see under 18, between 18 and 21, and so on.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. That's fine. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of Delegate Cham's amendment, please raise your hand. Cardin, Shetty, people just moved around. Fisher, Williams, Moon, Erican Bartlett, Crutchfield, I think Cham, Grammer, Jones, Shoemaker, Anderson, Davis, Tolles. All right, I see 15 votes in favor. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, that amendment is adopted, and we're going to excuse Delegate Cham because she has an appointment that she cannot miss, and we thank her very much.
On the way was yes.
All right, now we will go to the amendment. This is an amendment from me, starting let's do, actually, I lied. Let us do the amendments from Delegate Crutchfield, starting 463724. During the conversation yesterday, the question was set, asking what the definition of high personal net worth was. So to do that, Delegate Crutchfield put together an amendment that would indicate that the definition of high personal net worth would be an amount exceeding $1.7 million. Delegate Crutchfield, is that the sum and substance of your amendment?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
All right. I believe that we've taken this language more or less from one of Delegate Jazz Lewis's bills from last year. I think his bill had an escalator in it for the consumer price index. We don't touch that. We just leave it at $1.7 million
Right.
for to be considered high net worth. Any questions? Is there a motion on the amendment?
So moved.
So moved. Second. And a second. Are there any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all right. Delegate Tolles has a question.
I'm sorry, I had got interrupted for a second. Where did the 1.7 million come from again?
It came from Delegate Jazz Lewis's bill that he introduced in 2021 that specifically defined the term. So we're basically borrowing from his legalization bill that he dropped last year. Okay.
Thank you.
Delegate Bartlett.
Thank you. Real quickly, I just wanted to know, because I was trying to find the amendment. Does it say it says the individual, right?
It says the individual's net worth. I'm checking. We can check.
So I guess my question is, because it says the individual, are we also encompassing the business owner who wants to
Right.
cultivate?
So Delegate Bartlett, it says the award of grants and loans to small minority and women business owners and entrepreneurs with a high personal net worth. Okay, and that's what we're defining. So they're going to be excluded. So those people those people with assets over 1.7 million will be excluded from getting the grants or the loans.
Right, what I was getting at was, and I know this was not part of the amendment per se, but my question is, if I were a business owner and the business is in the name and I'm an MBE under my business, right? I'm not an MBE under myself as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Would my company that makes 5.7 million as an MBE still be able to would be able to get out of this particular narrow defining of high net worth? That's where I'm going with it.
Oh, I got you. So is it the personal person that
Yeah.
owns the assets, or is it the business? Well, right now it's really the business.
And do we need to define that? That's what I was getting at. But if we don't, I don't care.
I don't think we need to define it
Okay.
at this
Okay.
point. No.
Thanks.
I need to mention there is a second part, as was pointed out to me on the amendment 463724, and Delegate Crutchfield raised this issue as well yesterday, and I believe it has to do with
Juveniles.
the may on page 11, line 14. It basically changes the shall to a may in that context to say that the court can either fine or they may have someone do a drug education course, providing that one or the other. Okay. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, could we take a vote here? All in favor, please raise your hands. Shetty, Moon, Bartlett, Grammer, Jones, Williams, Crutchfield, Munoz, Shoemaker, Anderson, Tolles, Davis, Conaway, Erican, Howell. Anyone opposed?
My hand is up,
Juanica
Mr.
Fisher
Chair.
was a yes. Juanica Fisher is a yes. So I think that's 16 is a yes. So that amendment is adopted. All right. Okay. Let's now go to Delegate Williams' amendment, 773320. Delegate Williams' amendment changes one number. The length of time that a person has to wait after the completion of their sentence before they can seek an expungement. Under Delegate Williams' amendment, it would go from 4 years to 3 years. I'll say that again. And right now in the bill, right now under the law, somebody who was convicted of possession with intent to distribute marijuana has to wait 15 years to file for an expungement. Under the bill, it shortens that from 15 to 4 years, specifically for possession with intent to distribute marijuana. And under the Delegate Williams amendment, we would change that 4 years to 3 years. So they'd be able to seek an expungement after 3 years after their sentence is completed. And that does include the probation at the end of the sentence. The committee considers this a friendly amendment. And can I have a motion on the amendment?
I heard
I'll
somewhere
move.
that good things come in threes.
Move the amendment.
There's a motion and I've heard many
Second.
seconds. That's fine. Is there further discussion on this amendment? All right, seeing none. All in favor of this amendment, please raise your hands. Delegate Fisher, Shetty, Moon, Bartlett, Crutchfield, Williams, Jones, Anderson, Tolles, Davis, Howell, Conaway. All those opposed. Munoz, Shoemaker, McComas, Arakan, Grammer. The amendment is adopted. I think that was 13-5. 14-5. All right, 14-5. All right, amendment is adopted. So that is that one. That one. Delegate Cox is not moving his amendment forward, so we're not going to hear that one. I have an amendment for that's numbered 713320. 7, this is on page 8 of your packet, if it is organized that way, which hopefully maybe it is. So what this does is it adds adds language to the study in the bill with regard to medical marijuana patients being able to do home grow. Right now, there's a study in the bill that allows medical marijuana patients to do home grow. This adds to that the group would also study the best practices implemented in other states related to the establishment of on-site cannabis consumption facilities. We're not dealing with issues related to licensing or anything like that. We just want them to study best practices with regard to the establishment of on-site cannabis consumption facilities. I'm putting this amendment forward. The idea here being that we believe that this is one way to begin to address places where people could consume cannabis with other people without fear of engagement with the police. Delegate Williams.
So I know Delegate Fisher is might not be available. So is this what she would typically call a weed works place? Like you would see in some other countries?
I'm not sure if it's exactly going to be that, but I think it would be something that they would look at. Again, I'm not going to presuppose what they look at when they look at best practices. So I don't want to particularly hem it into any one thing.
Okay.
Delegate Arakan.
So this is different than the home grow amendment?
This is different than the home grow amendment, correct?
Okay. Okay, this is like, okay, like a shop or something, like a retail shop.
Yes, a shop. That's correct. I'm going to move the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. Any further discussion? Delegate McComas?
Mr. Chair, is this like a coffee bar or a place where people sit around and smoke marijuana? And instead of like a coffee bar where people, they got tables and they could sit around and talk, and maybe they have entertainment and that kind of stuff.
Again, this is going to be studying best practices, but I think that perhaps the rough equivalent would be to a coffee bar or yes. I mean, we have bars where people consume alcohol. It would be looking at best practices if we were looking to have some place where people consume marijuana.
Well, just a quick question. Isn't this kind of getting the cart before the horse? Because we really don't know if this is really what we should be doing, because there hasn't been enough study and analysis of this.
And I guess
are these in other places?
That's why we're looking to do a study to determine, that's what the amendment does. It looks to do a study to see if these things are done in other places and see how they've handled it and how they've handled it from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah, but shouldn't we just see how things go, period, before we even study this?
Well, I think that studying how it's worked in other places is part of seeing how things go in other places. So I think, yeah. Are there further questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, again, 713320, please raise your hands. Delegate Fisher, Shetty, Moon, Jones, Williams, Crutchfield, Munoz, Bartlett, Grammer, Anderson, Tolles, Davis, Conaway, Arakan, and Howell. Anyone opposed? McComas, Shoemaker. See 15-2. All right, that is adopted. Okay. I'm going to draw your attention to Amendment 163125. This is an amendment to the disparity study, and it adds the Department of Legislative Services into the study, so it allows them to assist with the disparity study, so that we can continue to move the study forward quickly. I think that's the best way of putting it at this point. Could I have a second? I move this amendment. Could I have a second on the amendment, please?
Second.
All right. So motion on a set and a second. Is there discussion on this? Delegate Williams.
I'm trying to follow along in the packet, Mr. Chair. I apologize. What page in the
7?
packet? Page 7.
7. The top is 163125.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Seeing no further questions, all in favor of this amendment, please raise your hands. Delegates Fisher, Cardin, Shetty, Moon, Jones, Williams, Crutchfield, Munoz, Bartlett, Grammer, Shoemaker, Anderson, Tolles, Conaway, Davis, McComas, Arakan, and Howell. Anyone opposed? I think that was 18. 18, it's nothing. All right, now we'll go to home grow. Home grow is on pages 1 through 6 of your packet. It does a couple things. The amendments number, though, starting at the top of the page, 823. That's the number of this amendment. There's a couple things. It says that a person can have, it basically establishes the ability of people to have 2 plants that they can grow at home that count towards their personal use amount. The law would still remain the same, that if you had more than 2 plants, you would still be liable for the manufacture of marijuana, and that carries the 3-year penalty that we've discussed before. But this does change things and allow for someone to grow 2 plants. I will say that throughout the work group process, and perhaps a lot over the last couple of days, I've started to learn a great deal about the production of marijuana, and I've learned about male and female marijuana plants. The male produces pollen, the female produces a bud. In order to grow marijuana with THC that would be usable, you want to have unfertilized female marijuana plants. When a female plant becomes fertilized, and it produces seeds, then the plant no longer produces THC. The male plants, as was said to me earlier, the males are worthless for the production of TLC or THC, maybe TLC too, but I apologize for that. But for THC. And so you would want to have two two female plants or one or two female plants that you could then harvest the bud, and then that is what includes the THC that people would consume. Before taking the bud off of that plant, the grower could take a cutting from that plant and basically start their second plant. Then that plant would grow, and then they'd harvest that plant and go back and forth between those two plants. I'll be clear that in this amendment, it also says that cultivating the cannabis has to be in an enclosed locked space to which persons under 21 don't have a key. A person who cultivates cannabis shall take reasonable precautions to ensure that they're secure. If they, apart from that, from unauthorized access by a person under 21 years of age, the cultivation has to occur on property lawfully in possession of the cultivator or with consent of the person in lawful possession of the property. You can't do it if you're under 21. And the cannabis plants may not be cultivated in a location where plants are subject to public view, including a view from another private property, without the use of binoculars, aircraft, or other optical aids. So we've adopted in part some of the language with regard to its accessibility to kids, and it's being visible from one of the Senate bills that has been introduced on this topic. So first, I'd like to offer this amendment and ask for a second on the amendment.
Second.
There's a second on the amendment. All right. We'll now take questions. Delegate Grammer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I actually did a little bit of research about this myself, and I'll tell you why I started to do this. So my mother actually, at one point, was a card holder for medical marijuana. She has an injury and she has real problems sleeping, and for some time she used the tincture, I believe they call it, and she was almost immediately priced out of the market. It was so expensive for her to use. So my interest in home grow is frankly people who have like a pain management issue and can't afford to get involved in the system, frankly because they're priced out, and we've heard that not only in the current speaker's work group, but in Speaker Bush's work group as well. We heard similar stories from people around the state. So I don't know like how much product you would need to pack a bowl or roll a joint. So I had to do a little bit of study on this myself, and it actually takes a little bit of time to grow the plant itself. So I'm a little bit concerned that 2 really isn't going to be sufficient for personal use. And if it's okay, I'd like to move in principle that we adjust the number to 6. Just because of the growth cycle for the plant. I mean, we're talking about weeks or months by the time you start growing it to the time you're actually able to harvest it.
My understanding is that you can grow between 6 to 8 ounces from a plant over a year. So we're talking about 12 ounces to a pound in a year from 2 plants. I think that at this point, we are still at the beginning of a process where we're going to be going to conference with the Senate. I think there are going to be further discussions on this. I do think that it's important that we have some home grow in this legislation, and I think that this is a beginning to that conversation to some degree. Having said that, I think to your point on the needs of people, particularly I think with medical marijuana cards for home grow. The other thing that the bill does do is it includes a study from the medical marijuana from the commission on what it would take to allow medical patients to grow their own cannabis and the process by which that would be set up. So that is also moving as part of this legislation. So we wanted to look at those people as well and ensure that. But I think for now, 2 plants is where this amendment is going to sit, And we'll go from there as the process continues.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'll do this. I'll split the difference. I'd still like to make the motion. I don't believe it's arbitrary. And this is from talking from a lot of people. I'm not a user in any capacity myself, but I think this is going to really limit people. And I'd still like to make the motion. I'll split the difference and I'll go for, and I'd ask for the consideration in a second.
Now, I appreciate that. This is my amendment. It's an amendment that's been provided to the committee. The amendment says two plants, and it's the way that the amendment. I personally don't accept an attempt to amend it, and so I'm going to ask for people to stick with me and stick with the committee, and move forward with a home grow amendment that includes 2 plants. So are there further questions on this issue? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, again, 823, please raise your hands. Delegates Grammer, Juanita Fisher, Shetty, Williams, Crutchfield, Bartlett, Moon, Jones, Davis, Conaway, Tolles, Anderson, and Howell, and Erican. Anyone opposed? Shoemaker, Carden, Munoz, and McComas. The amendments adopted 14-4. Okay, now going through my paper and making sure I think we're almost done. There is one more amendment that has been offered. It's been offered by Delegate Grammer. And his amendments, I'll let him say what his amendment is, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this amendment tries to reconcile the fact that in not only legalizing for commercial use, but legalizing for recreational use, that we're essentially extricating ourselves from federal law. And in doing so, there's this odd prohibition that causes a person to be excluded to own firearms. And we've talked a lot about the need to not put people in front of law enforcement. And I think that's the general concern with marijuana prohibition in general. But as we know, via state law, these folks, even medical cannabis card holders, they're still considered prohibited people in terms of firearm ownership. So what this amendment does is it's really simple, and it says if you use cannabis, that cannot be used to cause you to be a disqualified person. And you all know I'm a big critic of no-knock warrants, and in the case of Duncan Lepp in Montgomery, that entire warrant was generated around the fact that he was considered a disqualified person, which turned out not to be legitimate. The charges in the warrant were not true, but nonetheless, I think it causes the scenarios where you get subjective enforcement, you put people in front of law enforcement, and being a disqualified person makes you subject to an arrest warrant and everything that comes thereafter. So this closes that loophole. And Frank, a lot of people again have spoke to the fact that a lot of people aren't going to, when we say legalize, a lot of people aren't going to realize that there is this loophole that if you now go on and you buy a joint via the legal market and you smoke that, now you are subject to an arrest warrant. So what we're doing is closing that loophole. And I think in a large way, the cannabis issue is very much related to the firearms issue. So I would hope we could close this loophole now that we're moving on with a larger issue. In good faith, I would move the amendment, and I'd ask for a second.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on this amendment? The Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate the amendment from my friend, Delegate Grammer. I understand the conflict he's trying to flag here. I just want to point out a couple things here. We've had this as standalone legislation as effect. I think Delegate Grammer and some others have brought it It's even passed through the Senate with fairly wide margins. I will concede all of this. But I will say this, that those bills attempted to resolve the conflict between medical card holders and the laws you cite. And really, we were talking about people in a patient context. And those bills were moving out of the Senate with that backdrop and came over here. And however you feel on that topic, those bills were unable to move through the House of Delegates. And that's even as they only applied to the firearms right of medical cannabis users. And so I think you're contemplating this in an even broader form here as we move to legalization. And so many more people would be theoretically allowed under Maryland law. And I grant you that that's a further expanded set of conflict. I don't think we're going to be able to resolve that, unfortunately, but I do worry that since we weren't able to get this passed through the House, even as to medical card holders, that it really is going to otherwise hold up this bill for a lot of folks if we try to do it for a much larger pool. And so for that reason, I am a little bit resistant to this amendment coming on. And as you know, we've got the timing constraints of needing to get this thing through, potentially a governor's veto so quickly. So I apologize for that, but I resist the amendment.
Chair would also ask the committee to resist the amendment. One of the challenges with working on this issue as it relates and interplays with federal law is that when you have a direct contravention of federal law, which I think that this amendment would lead to, it can to some degree take down the ship. And that's one of the challenges that we have to face on this issue from the federal level. So to the extent that we cannot directly contravene federal law, then that is something that we should avoid. Delegate Grammer, then Delegate Arakan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just mention that legalization contravenes federal law, and we're clearly open to doing that. Allowing commercial sale of the product contradicts federal law. We're clearly willing to do that. And the legal premise, and the Attorney General notes this, is that Maryland acts as a point of contact for these transactions, and it's actually it is legal under his opinion if we were to do this, because we're not obligated to do anything regarding these checks. So it's about not putting people in front of law enforcement, and for that reason, I'd ask for your support. Delegate Arakan.
I just want to say we can add something in, like they do in contracts that says, if any part of this, law should be found to be in contradiction, then the rest of it still stands. That way we're not in a situation where we're damaging the whole policy, just that little piece. I mean, I feel like I've seen that in a bill before. I know I see it in contracts all the time.
Delegate Moon.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll just say one more piece on process here. I think it's pretty clear we are heading down towards some sort of conference process on this, and seeing as how the Senate, as I previously noted, has passed this sort of measure, I kind of think it's sort of incumbent on them on whether they're going to actually, as we hit the home stretch here, wrap these issues together and throw them back over to us. So there's at least another stage of conversation on this. So again, but at least the House has been resistant to this. So I think we need to get our side through as we can.
All right. There's been discussion on the amendment. Again, this is 273220, Delegate Grammer's amendment. All in favor of Delegate Grammer's amendment, please raise your hands. Please raise your hands. I see Munoz, Grammer, Arakan, Shoemaker, McComas. Okay, all those opposed? I see Cardin, Shetty, Moon, Bartlett, Crutchfield, Williams, Jones, Davis, Conaway, Lopez, Anderson, and Howell. 5 to 12, the amendment fails. With that, that appears to be all the amendments I have on House Bill 837.
Mr. Chair, did you get my hand for that opposition?
Oh, and tolls. Okay, I'm sorry, 13, I think. Did I get tolls already? I think I got tolls. Okay, that's fine. We got you. It still fails. All right. That appears to be all the amendments that I have.
Move the bill as amended, Mr. Chair.
Motion on the bill is amended for a favorable. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay. Thank you. We're going to move on the bill as amended on House Bill 837. Is there any further discussion on the bill as amended? All right, Delegate Juanita Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself and I had Wi-Fi problems. I had a quick question for council, if that's okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to understand clearly before we move the bill that anything in pertaining, and I think it's on page 17, when we define an individual in this bill, that individual is a person, not a company or an entity or anything like that, as it applies to this legislation. I think it can be confusing because sometimes a corporation can be considered an individual. So when we're talking about all the different aspects of the bill, and I just wanted to clarify that for the record, that every time an individual is discussed in this bill, that it's a person. Did I say something weird? You're looking at me strange.
Council?
In the criminal law article, the word person is used throughout it to refer to whenever there's a crime, a statute establishing a crime, the word person is always used. Having said that, the general provisions article of the Maryland Annotated Code, section 1101 of that article contains definitions that apply throughout the entire annotated code. And for example, minor means a person under the age of 18. And so anywhere in the code that it says minor, that means a person under age 18. And there's a number of those common definitions, and person is defined in that section. And it does include corporation and other kinds of entities.
And I guess, Mr. Chair,
Commonly understood in the criminal law article that it's referring to a human being.
yeah, and I think that's the only thing that I don't know the answer, Mr. Chair, and I just wanted to flag it here, and maybe it can be worked out a little later, but it kind of came to me when it came to like the home growing and other things that we're really sure when we say that it's a person, not Wanika LLC. You know what I mean?
So in particular with the home grow, it's to at a particular address. So that would be first, I think it would necessitate that it would be a person that is doing that. And the people who are held liable are, as counsel is mentioning, that's in the criminal law article. So you're talking about a person, a live human being, and not an LLC or something along those lines.
Okay.
If this is something that we need, if this comes up again in conference, I'll make sure to look at it there.
And then I just had a second clarifying question before we vote. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And then my other one was in the bill when it comes to like the concept of bundling. I just want to clarify when people, sell things and maybe cannabis is a part of that, or you get that with that is not addressed in the bill, or it would be at a different time. Do you know what I mean? If you could just clarify for that.
You're talking about the sharing portion, the sharing amendment that we passed last night. The sharing amendment, what you're talking about is included in that amendment is a provision that would avoid the barter economy that seemed to grow up in Washington, where people were trading T-shirts and an ounce of pot for some for $100 or something like that. And they were kind of getting around sales provisions that way. We include the language that would prohibit that in the sharing amendment that we passed yesterday.
Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chair.
All right. All right. Seeing no further questions, there's a motion and a second. We will take a roll call. The Vice Chair,
Yes.
Delegate Shoemaker,
No.
Delegate Anderson,
Yes.
Delegate Arakan,
No.
Delegate Bartlett,
Yes.
Delegate Carden.
Mr. Chair, can I just quickly explain my vote? I want to do it so it would only take 30 seconds. My vote is a yes. And I was originally thinking I was voting against this bill, but you and your team and the work group have really done a great job of putting in a lot of what my concerns, dealing with a lot of what my concerns were, particularly making sure that we are studying the impacts on children and making sure that we are doing everything we can to reduce use by people who could have long-term negative impacts. And because of that, and because there really can be no trigger to reverse this decision, but it has to be done legislatively at a later time if we decide that that our decision was regretful. And because you have done so much to make sure that those things are dealt with, I'm going to vote yes.
Thank you. Delegate Conaway. Delegate Conaway,
Yes. Yes.
you're voting yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Delegate Crutchfield,
I'm voting yes.
Delegate Davis,
Yes.
Delegate Juanita Fisher,
Yes.
Delegate Grammer,
No.
Delegate Howell,
Yes.
Delegate Jones,
Yes.
Delegate Lopez,
Yes.
Delegate McComas.
My vote, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I know it's been a tremendous effort, but no.
All right, Delegate Munoz,
No.
Delegate Shetty,
Yes.
Delegate Tolles,
Yes.
Delegate Williams,
Yes.
the chair votes yes. Delegates Cox and Cham are marked excused. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11. Let's take 15-5. House Bill 837 moves to the floor, favorable with amendments. Now we have House Bill 1. House Bill 1 is the actual language, the actual question that would be going on the ballot. It says that subject to subsection B of the section of the bill, on or after July 1st, 2023, an individual in the state who is at least 21 years old may use and possess cannabis. In section B, it says the General Assembly shall by law provide for the use, distribution, possession, regulation, and taxation of cannabis within the state. This is the mechanism by which we can put the referendum on the ballot. And this, I don't believe seeing any amendments.
Move favorable on House Bill 1.
Davis has an amendment.
Okay.
Sorry.
Delegate Davis has an amendment. It is 573626.
Do you need a explanation?
Yes.
So the chairman just read what section A says, and I've long thought that it gives the impression to citizens as they vote for the referendum that we are absolutely making it legal. My amendment, which simply says that you can use cannabis at the age of 21 with a reduced penalty. And I believe that that speaks more to what we're actually doing than actual legalization. I move the amendment.
Second.
There is the amendment and a second. The vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that. I think it's a little overly technical because, to be honest, you know, when I put in my first marijuana legalization bill some years ago, the advocates on the issue told me, I tried to make it an unrestricted amount, but they told me you had to put in some amount. Otherwise, you were going to invite the scrutiny of the feds to have an unbounded program. And so I think most of the states that have embarked on what we use in popular terminology as marijuana legalization have faced the same question of having to choose where the various thresholds are at. So I appreciate the sentiment there, but I think the other aspect I would point to is, you know, and I think through some of the conversations, especially the late breaking ones, there is a commitment to put some of this funding, theoretical funding that we'll get for this program, into more mass education as to what one can and can't do, sort of the street law aspects of the new Maryland law. So you're right, it's definitely going to be incumbent upon us to do a good job with that outreach. But I think for simplicity of the ballot, you know, we don't want to be overly prescriptive on how we term it. And I think most folks understand that what we're getting at here is legalization, even though we had to choose an amount.
Delegate Arakan.
I really like the amendment because that's a worry of mine too, that people will not understand how detailed and like we don't even know what the regulatory framework's really going to look like. So I don't know. I mean, I have a very similar concern that people are not going to understand. They're just going to see the headlines. This is how we consume news now. It's like just, you know, a sentence. And this is just going to be Maryland legalizes marijuana. And I'm, you know, I think that explain that you can still get in trouble is going to be important because we could see an uptick in arrests because we haven't explained it well enough to the people. And most people aren't going to read the whole article. I think they're really just gonna think that it's totally legal. So.
I would say that the chair appreciates Delegate Davis for introducing the amendment, but we politely but firmly request that the committee resist the amendment. The speaker from the very beginning of at least from the House process indicated that she felt very strongly that there should be a referendum and that the referendum should put on the ballot clearly that a person who's at least 21 years old after July 1st would be able to use and possess cannabis. And under the bill that we just passed favorable with amendments, they would be able to use and possess cannabis up to 1.5 ounces, consistent with what happens all the way across the country. I believe that consistent with the other states that have done this, I should say, across the country. They may have different personal use amounts, but the reality is that people would not be going to jail for the simple possession of marijuana, just as they have been going to jail for years and years. Hundreds of thousands of people have been going to jail for this. And so I believe that the amendment as offered would not only seek to confuse the ballot, it would seek to, I believe, make it harder for this to actually get approved at the polls. So for those reasons, I asked the committee to resist the amendment. Is there further comment? Delegate Conaway.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Listen, why do you think it would be harder for the bill to pass at the polls with this amendment?
I think that what the legislation that we just passed does make it clear that a significant amount of cannabis would be legal and legal for people to possess. It would do that. What would not be legal for people to possess, it would not be legal for them to distribute it outside of the systems that would be set up. And it wouldn't be legal for them to begin to grow large amounts of it to be able to sell outside of the legal processes for being able to sell it. And so that That is the same way that it is with alcohol. And I think that this amendment would seek to confuse things and make people believe that there would still be some kind of reduced penalty for simple possession of marijuana, and there clearly would not be for the vast majority of people carrying an ounce and a half or less. The Vice Chair. Thank you. The Vice Chair.
Yeah, let me just reiterate again, from because I've been following the state by state movements on this stuff for some time now. And again, it would be a little bit confusing and weird if we started calling this something other than marijuana legalization, when what we've done is entirely consistent with what other states have done and called it marijuana legalization. Because then I think voters would get to the ballot and think that they're voting on something different than what most of the other states have done, when in fact it's the opposite. We will have been, having to confront some of the same, challenging questions, but that nevertheless, the intent is to legalize a personal use consumption amount. So anyway, we don't need to belabor the point.
Delegate Grammer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make the opposing opinion. We have not done what other states have done. Other states have addressed the gun question. Other states have passed more permissive home grow. We have the weakest home grow that I can find out of any list of states. I think it's a fair point, one that I've made, one that others have made, that this isn't legalization. So I think it's a fair question, and because Delegate Davis is going to get a vote, I'm going to support it.
Right. Are there further questions regarding this issue? Saw Delegate Shoemaker going to his button there. All in favor of Delegate Davis's amendment, please raise your hands. Delegate Munoz, Shoemaker, Erican, McComas, Howell, and Davis. I see, and Crutchfield. I see 7. All those opposed to the amendment, please raise your hands. Delegates Shetty, Bartlett, Williams, Jones, Conaway, Tolles, Lopez. I can't see the Vice Chair. The Vice Chair, Anderson, and Fisher, and the Chair. 7-11, the amendment fails. All right, we're on the bill. It's a straight favor. There's a motion for a favorable. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And there's a second. Further discussion on House Bill 1. Seeing none, we'll take a roll call. The Vice Chair.
Yes.
Delegate Shoemaker.
No.
Delegate Anderson.
Yes.
Delegate Erican.
No.
Delegate Bartlett.
Yes.
Delegate Cardin.
Yes.
Delegate Conaway.
Yes.
Delegate Cox is not here. That's right. Delegate Crutchfield.
Yes.
Delegate Davis.
No.
Delegate Juanita Fisher.
Yes.
Delegate Grammer.
No.
Delegate Howell.
Yes.
Delegate Jones.
Yes.
Delegate Lopez.
Yes.
Delegate McComas.
No.
Delegate Munoz.
No.
Delegate Shetty.
Yes.
Delegate Tolles.
Yes.
Delegate Williams. Delegate Williams.
Oh, I said yes.
All right. All right, the chair votes yes. 14-6, House Bill 1 is headed to the floor. Thank you all very much. We will have bill hearings on Tuesday at 1 o'clock, and we will see you all again then. Thank you very much and have a good weekend.